Good Tuesday morning. Welcome into Morning JOX. JOX 94.5. Damian Mitchell. And back from sabbatical, the one and only Conrad Van Order. The crew is back. Conrad, how have you been, brother? How was sabbatical?
I've been good. I hope people weren't listening to the lies that Three Man Front was telling about me being, suspended and such. Or
Yeah, I didn't spread those. I didn't spread any of those.
no. It's okay. I know it wasn't you. But no. In all seriousness, I'm good. Had a good weekend at the beach. Went and visited some family. Got a nice sunburn.
There we go.
Even though I spent 90% of my time inside watching basketball at the beach. But other than that, no, it was great. It's good to be back and not to I guess let the cat out of the bag too early, but we're gonna be here for 4 hours today instead of one. So
Atta baby.
it'll be a good way to come back to things. So, and I'm glad to see that you are wearing the appropriate shirt. That's nice.
Yeah, only you should have seen me yesterday. It was the other team that represented in the Sweet 16 from the state of Alabama.
UAB?
In the NCAA tournament. In the NCAA tournament.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It was the Auburn Tigers, and I'm a big SEC guy.
Look at you, Switzerland. You're right in the middle.
Hey, I represent all teams in the SEC, not named Texas A&M. Everybody else, you know what? You got my support. You got my love. I just can't get jiggy with those guys from College Station. But no, man, so we get a chance to hear from you as far as your reaction to Alabama and Auburn both being in the Sweet 16, and we did a lot of just discussing just what we saw in the opening weekends of the NCAA tournament. Auburn with Janai Broome not being, the usual Janai, but still finding ways to win and advance is kind of just the nature of the game. But also Alabama, where it seems like the bigs have been more of a focal point in the first two games of the NCAA tournament. How much of an impact is that going to have for them moving forward in the Sweet 16 and potentially Elite Eight, if not Final Four?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'll just kind of go through for Alabama and Auburn, going through the first two rounds. And, I think, well, we'll start with Auburn and the number one seed. And, we can, I'm sure y'all had some fun on Friday after the Alabama State game and some of the struggles that you had in that one. And maybe not the start you wanted to get off to, but, you ended up winning that game by 20. It is what it is. And then going into the Creighton game. And I think, my takeaway from, at least the Creighton game for Auburn was, that was a really good team. And they shot 60% from three in the first half, something like that. And the fact that you were able to battle back from that, because, again, doing that for one half, okay, doing that for two halves, that's a completely different story. And obviously we saw that with Creighton and Auburn was able to fix some things defensively. But I thought, and I heard, a little bit of what y'all were talking about yesterday morning too, with, Janai Broome and him not being, putting up the same numbers that we saw from him in the regular season. And I think for, it's similar to Mark Sears, and we'll talk about that with Alabama in a minute, but it's a similar thing where, the first two rounds, you're sitting there and you can kind of go, okay, well, look at what we were able to do without getting the most from our best player, right? And you walk away and you probably feel pretty good about that. But the reality is now for both Alabama and Auburn, you look at those guys and you're like, okay, we made it past it, but now this is where
we need you. This is where we need you.
This is where we're paying you a lot of money. This is where the expectation comes in that you can kind of lead the charge for us and get us to where we want to be. And especially when you talk about Janai Broome, a guy that, very likely may win the National Player of the Year, you just haven't gotten that same level of production from him for whatever reason. And you give credit to, the teams coming in defensively and what they've been able to do to kind of limit him at times, but also just him not, hitting some of the looks that you're used to hitting. And, especially in the Creighton game, I know some people seem to be frustrated with, he's taking these threes, and in the regular season, to be fair, for a big man, he would hit some of those shots, right? And now you're getting into the tournament and he's not hitting them. And so you start to see where, the criticisms come in with that. And it's just, you can just tell that it's not, I guess the juice isn't there in the same way that it was in the regular season, but that doesn't mean that you can't get that back, now moving forward in the tournament. But, I think all things considered, for Auburn, at least from my perspective on the first two games, right? It's survive and advance. You beat, okay, you beat a 16 seed by 20. It wasn't great in the first half, but you picked it up. You figured out a way in the second half to look like the Auburn team. Creighton, that's just a good tournament team, right?
Yeah.
That's a team that, for 5 straight years now, they've gotten into the tournament and won at least a game in the tournament. And we've seen how difficult it is just to, win a game or two at times in the NCAA tournament. And so, I thought, winning the way they did over Creighton and closing that game out in the second half, I thought that was really impressive. And I think that should give you confidence moving forward if you're Auburn, because, that was a game that, you easily could have lost, especially based on how Creighton came out and kind of punched you in the mouth. But Auburn picked themselves back up and was able to take care of business. And then I think for Alabama, it was kind of similar, right? The Robert Morris game was certainly closer than a lot of us were expecting. It was closer than the Auburn-Alabama State game, that's for sure. And, that was a team that, they just matched up a little better with Alabama than I think some of us were expecting to. And, they showed why why they won their conference and were able to get into the NCAA tournament. But again, you just look at, okay, you survive in advance, you go on and you take a St. Mary's team that, again, I look at them similar to Creighton, right? We're used to seeing them in the tournament every year, and they just have a very specific style of basketball where, if they are the ones that are dictating the tempo of the game, they are the ones that are playing their style and forcing that on the opponent.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be really tough to beat. And so, for Alabama, again, it wasn't always pretty. For St. Mary's to have, that's the first half of that game was one of the worst offensive first halves of a game that I can remember. Because outside of they made 11 free throws and they had 8 points off turnovers. And so outside of those, which, in a lot of cases are kind of your gimme points, right? They scored 10 points. Basically them creating their own offense, they scored 10 points in the first half of that game. And yes, you're up double digits, but it still never felt like Alabama had really separated themselves like you saw in, maybe a game like Ole Miss and Iowa State, for example. It was just very clear from the beginning of that game that Ole Miss was on one, and Iowa State wasn't going to be able to keep pace with them. But, again, it's a competent team with a style of play that was going to be difficult for Alabama to play. But, when it came to rebounding, that was something we knew Nate Oates was harping on, and they answered the call on that. I thought you got to see some good stuff from, Darion Reed, what he was doing for them defensively and coming back from that injury. I think he can be a key piece for you moving forward. Grant Nelson had a good game, and he looks like he's fairly healthy. But again, it's, the same thing that I was just talking about with Janai Broom. And, I love Mark Sears. I know he's, accomplished incredible things at Alabama. But again, your first team All-American. We just watched you last year go on an absolute tear in the postseason. He shot over 40% from three. Now this postseason, he's shooting under 20% from three. That's where you need things to get going, because again, it's great right now. You're able to get past those games without Mark Sears being your leading scorer, without him, I guess looking like the Mark Sears he kind of was for the second half of the regular season. But now, especially against a BYU team that can score a lot. This is the part of the tournament where, is it a disappointment if Alabama or Auburn lose at this point? Absolutely. But these teams are good enough to beat you.
Yep.
And, this is a BYU team that can score. They average over 80 points a game. We saw what they did in that game against Wisconsin and how, you were able to get up into the 90s in that game against a very, very good team. And you certainly can't take them lightly. And similarly for Auburn, you're playing a Michigan team that, right now they're on a heck of a winning streak going through the Big Ten tournament and winning their conference, and now back-to-back wins here in the NCAA tournament. So this is where, you got to refocus a little bit, and you can look back and say, all right, it's good that we've gotten where we are, and having, other guys step up. Pettiford's been great. Miles Kelly's been great for Auburn. I talked about Grant Nelson. You've gotten some from Philon. Cliff Amore's been incredible for Alabama, and that's all great. You need all of those guys to step up if you're those teams, but
you need your main guys to continue that.
Absolutely,
because that's what gives you the confidence to go in and game out. to say like, hey, even if the supporting cast is doing their thing and our main guys are doing that thing, it's very hard to stop both Alabama and Auburn in that situation.
Mhm.
And you brought up a great point, and that's kind of what I want the question to be, kind of just throughout the day for us, since we got 4 hours to discuss it. But what's the expectation for this weekend, specifically this weekend? Do you think we only have one team in the state that will be in the Final Four? Do you think both teams advance? Do you think they only make it to the Elite Eight? Because when you look at the field, there's potential on both sides. There's potentials of the SEC. Well, of course, we're going to get one SEC team eliminated because of Kentucky and Tennessee. But there's a realistic shot that there can be 4 SEC teams in the Final Four. And it doesn't feel far-fetched. Like, imagine us having this conversation right before the brackets were unveiled. Well, right when the brackets were unveiled of, I mean, you know, we got 14 teams. Could we really have 4 teams in the Final Four? One of them may be even a 10 seed that can make the Final Four in Arkansas. I think that this weekend we're going to see, and you know, we have this discussion in football of teams that are quote unquote most deserving, or are they the 14 best? Are they the 12 best? I think the 16 team field that we have now is more competitive than we've seen in years past. And we had this discussion yesterday with Landrum. It's crazy that Arkansas is quote unquote the Cinderella team in this Sweet 16 because of where they were seated. And we talked about Kentucky imagine a conversation where Kentucky is a 3 seed and they're slept on. Like, they're probably, like, when you look at what they've done, it's the quietest 3 seed that we've seen Kentucky have, where in years past, we're like, oh yeah, like, it's pretty much going to go through them if they're going to be ranked if they're going to be seated this high, as long as they don't blow it. But I think that just the landscape of it, specifically this Sweet 16 this weekend, I kind of, like, you could give me an argument for all 16 teams making it to the Final Four championship game. And it actually would make sense. It seems feasible, where it doesn't feel like, oh, no, they're just running off emotion. No, I think that if a team doesn't play their A game, each one of them could be beaten.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think that's where, this is the weekend where hopefully it's going to pay off, right? In the sense that, maybe you didn't have a lot of those crazy upsets in the first couple of rounds. I mean, you had some in the first round, your Colorado States and things like that. But I know a lot of people were predicting that one. But I think now, because, let's be honest, a lot of times these teams, and I know there's rare exceptions, but you have your Cinderellas, and then what ultimately happens is, whether it's in the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, or even in the Final Four in some rare instances, where you have games that maybe aren't the most competitive because eventually they kind of hit that wall, right? Where they run out of gas, and as good as they've been, the more difficult the matchups as you continue and having to beat these teams, night in and night out, multiple weeks in a row, but now that you have 16 teams that you look at and you go, I think any one of these teams could make it to the Final Four, and they're all Power 4 teams. They all have a ton of talent on their rosters. You feel like, all right, now this is where we're going to benefit, and these are going to be incredibly competitive matchups for the rest of the way through the tournament because, yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, Arkansas is your Cinderella, right? And they have one of, if not the most expensive rosters in college basketball. So from a talent perspective, clearly, they can compare, with just about anybody that's left in the tournament just because they have a 10 next to their name. Maybe isn't quite indicative of the talent that they have on that roster because they were really a team, I mean, we talked about, it wasn't that long ago at the beginning of the season, it was, oh man, are they going to find a way to get rid of Coach Cal quickly because this thing's looking messy? And now,
Right.
You're seeing them reap the benefits of having a coach that has experience in the tournament and having a lot of guys that have played in the tournament other places. And it took them time to gel, right? You see this in pro sports a lot where you have on paper, man, this roster's amazing, but it takes guys time to figure out how to play together and kind of, carve out their specific roles. So no, I think it's awesome now moving forward where, yes, I understand, a lot of people were saying it was the most boring first weekend of the tournament that we've ever had. And I wouldn't go that far. I get it. You didn't have as many of the crazy upsets, but I think now moving forward, you're going to just have top tier basketball the rest of the way out here through the tournament. And yeah, I'm super excited for what you have. And I think it also helps that, I mean, okay, maybe Duke is an exception. But the rest of these teams, right, we've seen them play close games already. So
Yep.
you kind of feel like going into it, it really is kind of a coin flip in a lot of these matchups because, again, everybody has had their struggles at some point or another in the first round. Again, outside of Duke, who looked pretty good. So, yeah, you got to feel pretty good about this weekend. And I know last week, we had a lot of people, oh, Thursday and Friday are the best days of the year. And a lot of people were like, well, I actually like this Thursday and Friday with the Sweet 16 even better. So we'll see, but it should be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. 205-834-9450. Your text message, your calls, always welcome here on Morning Jocks. What are your expectations for Alabama and Auburn this weekend specifically? Do we see both of them advance? Do we only see one of them advance? Even if they win their Sweet 16, do you think they're going to get eliminated in the Elite Eight? Do you think one of them will be represented in a Final Four? We want to hear from you on the other side. Keep it locked right here on Morning Jocks and Jocks 94.5.
Welcome back into Morning JOX here on JOX 94.5, 620 on your Taco Tuesday morning here atop the Magic City. I know we've been talking a little bit about the NCAA tournament, getting into it for Alabama and Auburn, what's awaiting them in the Sweet 16. But quickly, I did want to give a shout out. Last night, we had the NCAA tournament, the women's side of the tournament, and you had Alabama taking on Maryland. Big shout out to the Maryland women's basketball team. They took down Alabama 111-108 in double overtime. I was able to catch the overtime and double overtime periods last night, and that game was electric. That game was absolutely incredible. And huge shout out to Maryland for being able to hit a big three late in that game and were able to hold on. Alabama had a shot at the buzzer, but unfortunately, turnover on the inbounds pass, and that's all she wrote for the Crimson Tide, unfortunately. But you have to give a huge shout out to Sarah Ashley Barker last night. She had 45 points, the most an SEC player has ever had in an NCAA tournament game on the women's side of things. She was an absolute bucket for Alabama last night. Just an incredible performance by her. You felt really bad. They were trying to get her the ball for the last shot. Unfortunately, came up a little bit short. But yeah, she was just sensational last night. Talk about the definition of putting a team on your back and just saying, "Hey, just give me the ball. I'm gonna give us a shot." And Alabama did have a shot, but unfortunately came up a little bit short. But she was absolutely sensational last night. So just wanted to give a shout out to her for her performance and the Lady Terps for pulling off that double overtime win. They now move on to the Sweet 16. They're in the women's bracket. And also thoughts and prayers to Juju Watkins, the USC star. Looks like she tore her ACL last night. And USC announced that she's that was a season-ending injury, but it looked like an ACL just based on if you saw it with her. The way her leg was moving, not so great. But yeah, thoughts and prayers for her. She has a bright future ahead of her. But yeah, sad to see one of the best players, maybe the best player on the women's side of things, go down with her team headed to the Sweet 16. So.
Yeah, and going back to Sarah Ashley, I mean, she went full Mamba mode. Like, she went full Kobe. It was like, even on the inbound, they like give three the ball. Like, don't know what y'all got going on. It's 1-on-5 at this point. And I, like, to your point too, I got a chance to watch the overtime and the double overtime, and I mean, she went 17 for 25 in the game. Like, that's
tough.
That's tough. Like, yeah, that's some real boss level types.
About to say, she had some big free throws to send it to double overtime, and then
and was ice cold with it. Like, just no emotion, just get in the routine. Boom, hit one, got the next one, went to three, and I was like, okay, like that's real big. Yeah, like this gangster move right there. But no, congratulations again for Alabama even making it this far. Unfortunate that it ends with, the second round of the NCAA tournament there on the women's side. 205-834-9450. We're discussing just the expectations this weekend for both Auburn and Alabama, as it is Sweet 16. A lot of people's brackets, probably like mine, after the first weekend, a little frustrated of how everything looked, but you still have a fighting chance. Somebody, we were talking with Saybear yesterday, and he, was talking about the tweet that your bracket really isn't busted unless your champion gets beaten. So right now I have Houston. In one of my brackets, I had Houston over St. John's, and St. John's, of course, was eliminated by Arkansas, which didn't see that one happening. So we're getting some reaction here on the Jocks text lines, phone lines, 205-834-9450. Brandon from Tuscaloosa. I think Auburn finds a way to pull off this weekend and make it to the Final Four. Bama wins the Sweet 16, but depends on who they play in the Elite Eight. If they play Duke, they lose. And if it's Arizona, they will probably win and make the Final Four. I know for the state of Alabama, we would take it. We would absolutely love it on both sides. I mean, I think when you look at, of course, the daunting task that is the Duke Blue Devils through 2 games of the NCAA tournament, when you look at everything that they compared to the number 1 overall and the number 1 seeds, they've kind of played the most complete in the first 2 games of the NCAA tournament, where they went out there, they removed all doubt, they made sure that they were the better team. They were the better team the entire time. And now, with Cooper Flagg looking like he's at 100%, a lot of those other guys around him starting to play some real level basketball. And again, with the ACC being as bad as it was, it always felt like all season long that Duke was just kind of carrying the flag. But they really have looked like the most dominant team in the NCAA tournament so far. Joseph texting, he says, I've got both Auburn and Alabama getting to the Elite Eight. Now, what happens after that? That's the question. So you're telling me old Michigan State or Hottie Toddy is going to pull off the upset against Auburn? Alabama fall into either Arizona or Duke? I had Alabama out in the Elite Eight. Just in pretty much every bracket that I had. And it was either to Arizona in one bracket or Duke in two of them. And based on what we've seen the first two times. Now, I do think that the matchup would be a little bit, the way that Alabama has played it through two games, I wouldn't automatically say it's a cakewalk if they did make it to the Elite Eight and play Duke. Like, Duke is going to have to play how they've been playing the first two games of the NCAA tournament. They're going to have to ball out. Mm-hmm. It ain't just like, roll Cooper Flag out there and, let him go for 40. Like, no, they're going to have to play complete basketball. But I do think that for Auburn on their side of things, one, I think they lucked out by not matching up with Texas A&M. Not to say Michigan isn't, a good basketball team, but it would have really, really been some gray area had Texas A&M been in this position right now in the Sweet 16 because of what we've seen Auburn and Texas A&M look like. Even when Auburn's had the better team, it's something about what Buzz Williams and those guys do that just kind of, irks Bruce Pearl and Auburn in the wrong way. But I do think that, Trey Donaldson has, familiarity with this Auburn team as he was on the roster last season. The guy from Yale that transferred, Wolf.
Danny Wolf.
Yeah, Wolf transferred in. Like he's probably licking his chops like, hey, dog, they have the ingredients. It's just, are they going to be able to put it together for 40 minutes of basketball? And again, I mean, he's seen Janai Broome. He knows. And especially if Janai's not coming in with I'm not going to say the utmost confidence, but he hasn't played to the standard in which he has all regular season long. If you're Wolf, it's like, okay, I might can get in his head a little bit. So it's very similar to how in football they say, don't let the running back beat you, or don't let the quarterback beat you. Let everybody else find a way to get it done. But one of the strengths that Auburn's had is, okay, even with Janai Broome not playing at full tilt, you got Tahad Pettiford just the last game against Creighton go for 20 plus. You saw Chad Baker-Mazar give you 17. It's the supporting cast doing their jobs and elevating their role in March. That's really what's separating Auburn from a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think, if you're Auburn, your biggest concern maybe going into this game is just, again, you're playing a team that, they have all the momentum right now. And talking about Michigan, just in going on that streak in your conference tournament and now getting back-to-back wins in the NCAA tournament, like they're riding high right now. And if you're Auburn, again, I still think you feel good about how the first week in the tournament went, right? You won both of the games that you needed to win. But I think we still all agree, right? Like we haven't seen the Auburn team that we saw in the regular season at times when they were clearly the best team in the country. And so I think that's, kind of your concern is, okay, if this is a game where we're going into it, we're still trying to kind of find that swagger about us. Well, we're going up against a team that they're confident in who they are right now, right? Because it's working for them. They are a team that's been firing on all cylinders for a couple of weeks now. And so is that something that's going to, grind to a screeching halt? Is this the kind of thing where, all right, now that you've had a couple of games in the tournament, right, you've gotten away from the back-to-back losses to end the regular season, and then what happened in the NCAA tournament, now you've got a couple days rest and you kind of rediscover that identity of what made you so great earlier on in the season. But I mean, again, I think it's the same thing for both Alabama and Auburn in these matchups, right? Is they're the better teams going in. You are just now at a point where, you're not really playing teams anymore that you can play your B game and still walk out of there with a 9, 10, 12-point victory, right? Like you're playing teams now where they are going to be able to take advantage of your vulnerabilities. And if you are not playing the level of basketball that you are more than capable of playing and that your fans are expecting to see from you, no one's going to be surprised necessarily to see you go home. So I think that's the challenge now, is trying to refocus. And, like you brought up, especially for Auburn in this matchup, right? You have that kind of that built-in motivation with, a Trey Donaldson who transferred to Michigan, Danny Wolf, who beat you and knocked you out and kind of led the charge for that Yale team last year. I mean, heck, you got Namari Burnett on the team who transferred over from Alabama, so you got a little bit of that IBOB rivalry in there as well. So there's a lot of interesting storylines in this game. But again, for Auburn, you've now gotten to the Sweet 16, and I wonder, if that played a part in it as well. Because, I mean, this is the first time Auburn's been in the Sweet 16 since they made their Final Four run, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a team that we are used to seeing in the NCAA tournament. And I'm not trying to be ugly, but let's be honest. We're used to them disappointing in the NCAA tournament for the last 4 or 5 years. And so now that you've kind of gotten that monkey off your back and you've been, okay, yeah, we're good. We got through that first weekend. All right, now, we're with that kind of mental hurdle of getting past those first 2 games is in the rearview mirror. So now let's just go and play basketball, right? And so maybe that's what Auburn needed just from the mental side, is to get to a place where they're kind of reminded of, all right, yeah, this is where we're supposed to be. We handled our business. Let's just go out there and play basketball and play the way that we were in the regular season, because, that version of Auburn, I don't know if any of these teams can beat them that are left in the tournament, just because of how dominant they were at times. So yeah, that's where I think you got to be at if you're Auburn. But again, you just have to. You're just going to have to get a little more from everybody moving forward, and that's just how it goes. The further you advance in the tournament, right? Is it's all right. The effort that you gave in one game is great, but you've got to be able to continue to build on it, because that's ultimately, whoever's going to make the Final Four, whoever's going to win a championship is going to be able to stack that momentum and carry it with them throughout a tournament. And you've just got to find a way now to hit a little bit of a different gear.
Absolutely. Joseph texts in again. He says he has Alabama losing to Duke and Auburn losing to Michigan State. He's sticking with his Final Four pick. He has Duke, Houston, Florida, and Michigan State and his Final Four. And that's the thing, too, that I think a Sweet 16, any loss in the NCAA tournament is going to feel like a disappointment, because you really feel like you have a chance to win it all. But I think a Sweet 16 loss stings a little bit more than an Elite Eight or a Final Four loss.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just based off how these teams are and how good they are, it would feel very underwhelming that, you didn't get it done against BYU, and then for Auburn, you didn't get it done against Michigan. But I think like you said, going into it, Auburn and Alabama are the better teams, but sometimes you may not be the better team that day. And I think that's what makes the NCAA tournament so fun. Like St. John's and Arkansas. Really and truly, in my heart of hearts, I was like, Arkansas can keep it competitive. I didn't think they were going to beat them. And they did. And it goes back to, okay, now John Calipari, I mean, yes, he has talent, but this isn't a Kentucky talent team. Like, this isn't what he's had when he was at Kentucky. Like, there are great players, but their roles are different. They all play it's a very different style. Like, I don't think any of these Arkansas teams were going to beat any of his Kentucky teams he's ever had in a, say like 7-game series. But they could make it interesting because of just how they play. Like, they play tough and grit. Like, the St. John's game was ugly on both sides. Nobody felt like they could make a shot even right there at the rim. But Arkansas was able to get like those extra possessions off tip rebounds and things like that. They were doing the grunt work and the dirty work. And that's why they find themselves in this position. So Cal has kind of, quote unquote, sacrificed talent for the effort, and he can coach the effort. And you may not be the most talented team he's coached as his, during his tenure as a head coach, but they found themselves in the sweet spot, no pun intended, in the Sweet 16, where, all right, if you're Texas Tech, you can't go out there and just, roll the ball out thinking, all we got to do is just outscore them. Nah, you're going to have to play some sound basketball. But I think that's what makes it so fun for this weekend. So again, we'll keep the conversation going on the other side. Get to your text message, your calls on just expectations for both Alabama and Auburn this weekend in particular. Do you think they're out in the Sweet 16? Do you think they're out in the Elite Eight? Do you think we have representation from both sides in the Final Four? All that and more on the other side. Keep it locked right here on JOX 94.5. 6:38 here on Morning JOX. JOX 94.5, Damian Mitchell, alongside Conrad Van Order. We got the whole morning block. We're going to have some fun, as we both will be filling in for McElroy and Kublik in the morning at the top of the hour, so we can keep the conversation going on the other side. Just wanting to know what the expectation is for both Auburn and Alabama in the NCAA tournament, specifically this weekend. Are they eliminating the Sweet 16? Are they eliminating the Elite Eight? Are they both advancing to the Elite Eight? Are they going to the Final Four? Are we potentially just going to straight up see the Iron Bowl of basketball for the national title? Complete sidebar. I got a little sidetrack watching Cam Ward's pro day with the Titans having the #1 overall pick. I like the way, and also I love the way Cam Ward goes to, Callahan, the GM, is like, yeah. What else do I need to do? Come on now. Let's not overthink
He
this.
wants to be there. He wants to be in Nashville.
You better believe it. And nothing will make me happier in that quarterback room than knowing that, hey, don't have to see number 8 out there again.
Who's he going to throw the ball to?
Calvin Ridley.
And?
Tyler Boyd.
You have Tyler Boyd. He's still in the NFL.
Yes. He was our number 4 receiver last year.
Okay.
And we still have Traylon Burks. Come on. He's on the roster.
How's his asthma?
It's probably about as good as mine at this point. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Say, whose conditioning's better, his or Anthony Richardson's? That's the question.
At least Anthony Richardson is playing. Like, at least his is playing. My dog can't even make it through practice. It's like, okay, here we go. This is what we traded A.J. Brown away for. Okay.
I'm not making fun of him for having asthma. I'm making fun of the fact that he was a first-round pick, and
yeah,
it's been.
And A.J. Brown's only done nothing but play in 2 Super Bowls since he left. We hadn't made the playoffs. Anyway, let's get back to basketball. We got a 3-hour show that we can discuss that. But we're having some fun here, and going back to the Cal discussions. When I was describing that, he's sacrificing talent for effort. Somebody texted in and says, so Cal is winning with 5-star heart. Essentially.
Well, he's just getting guys that were, instead of 5-star recruits out of high school, he just went and got handpicked the experienced guys from the college level.
Couldn't get you at Kentucky. How about Arkansas? Does Fayetteville, Arkansas sound pretty good?
It is just fun, though. You're watching it and you're like, I remember you at Tennessee. I remember you at Kentucky. I remember you at FAU. I remember you here. It's like, oh, yeah. I mean, hey, he's got some talent. And I mean, all things considered, with how that situation went down and the fact that they kind of had to scramble, because if you remember, I wish I could find the clip right now, but from when he got introduced at Arkansas, and he essentially said, I met with the team. There's no team.
Yeah, he's like, there is no team.
And so for that situation, because, I mean, he had one guy that stuck around. I think there was only one kid that was a scholarship player at Arkansas last year that actually stuck around at the program, and he had to go and put that whole roster together after, a lot of these portal moves and things had already been done. So, I applaud him for that. They certainly didn't spare any expense. They coughed up some money to make it happen, but I got to give credit to where credit is due. We were very critical on Coach Cal early in the year, and now he has proven that he still got it.
Absolutely. 205-834-9450. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's talk to our buddy PG. Wants to talk some NCAA tournament this morning. What's going on, PG?
Hey, good morning, gentlemen, and the big day today for you-know-who's birthday. And doggone, Damien, you should have worn the Auburn shirt today instead of yesterday.
Oh, yeah. I just grabbed the first thing I saw.
Yeah, the thing, when this does happen today, he's going to get his shoes knocked off, because when I got a surprise for him, he's probably never going to like me again. So,
oh boy,
it's going to be interesting.
You can't bring a real life gator up to the restaurant. I don't know if Taylor would appreciate that.
Doggone it, Conrad, you just blew it. Hey, the tournament, boy. If I would have lost this week, my team would have lost this weekend, I would have not probably even showed up Tuesday, because I don't know why I still get into this at 67 years old. I mean, it's like I'm still 20s and just throwing a fit, with the Gators. They look, I don't know. This team played them, this coach, I don't like him for UConn, but he knows his X's and O's, that's for sure. I was just amazed at how they just slow. I mean, we couldn't get nothing done. It looked. I didn't expect to win the way it was going. I mean, they led most of the whole game, and if it wasn't for Clayton's three to take the lead, and it just wasn't playing great at all. And I tell you, they've got a blueprint on us now. So Maryland's a pretty good team, and Texas Tech's a really good team. So I'm not sure we make it to the Final Four. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, I picked y'all to win the national championship, so I'm going to stick with my pick there. No, I mean, look, you went up against a team. I know they're not the UConn team for the last couple of years, but they were still the two-time defending champions. They clearly know how to operate in the tournament. And Dan Hurley, I don't like the guy, but he's a good coach. And I was just glad y'all won, not only for my bracket, but I mean, based on what you heard from Dan Hurley after losing that game, I don't want to know what he would have said if they had won and beating a number one seed. The whole nobody believed in us. Yeah, I didn't need to hear that from Dan Hurley, so I'm glad y'all took care of that, PG. But hey, maybe that's what you needed, right? You needed a little bit of a reminder of, okay, yeah, everyone's been telling us how great we are, but we can still, we're still beatable, and maybe that was a little bit of a wake-up call that you needed, PG. We'll see.
And I'm also wondering, wasn't his brother played for Duke, wasn't it? Didn't he?
Are you talking about Danny Hurley's brother?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bobby.
Yeah, Bobby Hurley. One other question: I think Alabama's got the toughest road because of Duke. If it wasn't for Duke, and by God, of anything, I'd love for Alabama to beat Duke. I don't want to see Duke in it, period. But it would be nice for Alabama. But to me, they have the toughest road. Auburn, I think Auburn's maybe got one of the easier. I think they'll take Michigan State now. But in fact, my Wolverine friend in Michigan wants to beat them so bad, because he's a huge Michigan fan. But I think Auburn's got the easiest road to get there. Now, that's my opinion, but I think Alabama's got the hardest with Duke. If Duke won there, I think Alabama would have the easiest one. Do you guys agree with that one?
We appreciate the call, PG. I think the reason why people think Auburn has the easiest road is because of Auburn's team. Like, I don't necessarily think the opponents really dictate. Now, I do think Michigan can match up similarly, but I think Auburn has more all-around depth than Michigan does, as far as Bruce can go down his roster and not have that big of a drop-off of anything. Where I think for Michigan, if the starters aren't necessarily putting in the grunt work, I mean, Dusty May now, he knows how to coach. He's taken, Florida Atlantic to the Final Four and things like that. But like, I don't think Michigan just has enough. And Michigan State, I think, is more of a difficult matchup than Michigan, because I think Michigan State was peaking at the right time for Tom Izzo. Like, the number 2 seed that they got was kind of on the backstretch earned, not necessarily given. It was kind of earned because they started to really gel well. They're late in the Big Ten schedule.
Yeah, well, and I think part of it for Michigan State. I'll be honest. Part of my thought with them is, Tom Izzo is one of the best tournament coaches of all time, and I think going up against that, in these kinds of a situation, people will just kind of lean with the Michigan State because of what Tom Izzo's done and all the Final Fours that he's gotten to and all the experience that he has. But I mean, again, it's the case with Auburn right now. We can make arguments when we come to the number 1 seeds, but there's a reason that Auburn was the number 1 overall seed going in. I think Auburn is a better team than Michigan State. I do think the interesting part with that matchup, though, is Michigan State's not a very good 3-point shooting team. And so while, you might traditionally look at that and go, oh, well, if you can't shoot 3-pointers, that's not going to go very well for you. And I know some people would say, well, Creighton just lit Auburn up in the first half from 3, but that's what Creighton does. But Auburn's very good at defending the 3. And, if you go back to something like, the Alabama matchups this year, for example, right? In that first matchup, you were able to lock Alabama out from 3, and they just weren't able to get enough of the mid-range shots and the shots around the rim that you were forcing them to take, and you walked away with the win in that one, right? And then in the last game of the regular season, again, you were able to defend the 3 well, and you were challenging Alabama. All right, you're going to have to score. You're going to have to win by scoring, more 2-point shots than we're going to score. And Alabama answered the bell on that. Yep. And so now playing against a Michigan State team that maybe their strengths offensively kind of play into how Auburn's going to force you to beat them, maybe that's where that matchup could be a little bit more difficult there. But again, I mean, that's a game I look at, and a lot of these games, right? If you're getting the old Janai Broom, I don't really have a big question about a lot of
Right.
these games. And I'm not saying that Auburn can't lose them, but if you tell me I'm getting Janai Broom out there going for 24-10, I'm gonna feel really good about these matchups, right? But if he is giving you 8 points or something like you've kind of gotten in these first two rounds, that's where things start to get a little more difficult. And you're going to need Dylan Cardwell, for example. He was awesome defensively against Creighton. You're going to need those kinds of things to continue if you're not going to get more production from guys like Janai Broom. So again, I mean, I think Auburn clearly on their path to the Final Four, they are the best team in that path. But I do look at, and I mean, obviously Michigan State's a 2 seed where Michigan's a 5 seed. I do think that's the tougher matchup, but I just think the way that Michigan State style of play matched with having Tom Izzo there calling the plays from the sideline, I think that could be a very tricky matchup for Auburn there. But they are the best team on paper, and they should be able to win that one. But again, I mean, it's the NCAA tournament. There's a lot of teams on paper that should have won games and did not.
Absolutely. 205-834-9450. We'll continue with your text message, your calls on the other side. Keep it locked right here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5. Imagine Dragons. They have a very distinct sound. Distinct.
This is from when they were good.
I got you. When they were doing, like the shows at the college football playoff, it seemed like every.
No, way before that.
Oh, wait. Okay. Back in the roots.
Yeah, I would say they had one good album, and then it just was kind of from there.
I got you. Morning JOX. JOX 94.5, Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, here with you for a few more moments. Well, technically, we'll be here for another 3 hours because we will be also piloting McElroy and Kublik in the morning as the guys get ready for, as the guys enjoy some spring break, get some time off. But we'll keep the conversation going, just the expectations of both Auburn and Alabama moving forward. Of course, we'll talk with Andy Burcham there at 8 o'clock. Discussing, Auburn's path in the Sweet 16 and things like that. We'll also take a look at some football news and notes as it is spring football practice going on, and a little bit of the conversation at the quarterback position for Alabama. Of course, you heard some rumblings of Austin Mack having a pretty good set of days, but then kind of a little bit of a drop off over the weekend. And there's a comparison that Keelan Russell. We'll save that one for Mac and Q because I do think it's a very, very high bar that they're starting to set, but it should be a great conversation that we'll have on the other side. But also, again, it's Sweet 16. Alabama's a basketball state. Also, UAB. They're pretty much one game away from playing for an NIT championship. The state of Alabama is a basketball state. We're taking over. I mean, baseball, for the most part, both sides are doing well. We know what the SEC tournament is going to be when it comes down here to Hoover. I'm telling you, man, we are an everything state. Except for gambling. Legally. My apologies. I feel like that's the only thing we're missing. Other than that, like, we're basically Vegas of the South. Don't you agree? Mac and Cube in the morning next.